Okay, chapter 9 is, I think, one of my favorite chapters, and it is a pretty important chapter because we get into marginal cost and benefit, marginal analysis, and some behavioral economics. So let's get into it. Um, Everyone knows what explicit cost is because that's something that involves actually laying out money. When you go to Starbucks and you buy whatever latte you're ordering, your $5 is the explicit cost you are paying. But the implicit cost is what is measured by the value of the benefits that are foregone. Um, Kind of like the opportunity cost. The book gives a good example of going to college. The explicit cost of going to college is your tuition, room and board if you're going to live on campus or near campus, books, that sort of thing. Implicit cost is the money you would have earned by working a full-time job instead of going to school. Um, so this chapter has us looking into both of that. So again, looking into the opportunity cost of an additional year of school, your explicit cost in this example is $9,500. The total implicit cost, because of your foregone salary of $35,000 a year, which is pretty impressive that you could have made that without going to school, is so you add those together to get your total opportunity cost, your explicit cost plus your implicit costs. So this leads us to accounting profit versus economic profit. Most people here, if you've taken especially an accounting class, would be familiar with an accounting profit. And this would be your leftover money after you pay all your expenses. The economic profit is a little bit different. So again, accounting profit is the business's revenue minus explicit costs and any depreciation. The economic profit is the revenue minus the opportunity cost, which is usually less than the accounting profit. Oftentimes, we'll see that economic profit is equal to zero with a business, and you'll see that in future chapters. Don't let that throw you off and think that the business isn't making any profit whatsoever. It's still making profit. Of an accounting profit, but when you add in the opportunity costs, sometimes the economic profit is going to be equal to zero. That's a little funny cartoon. Ha, she will marry him. Capital is a good term to know. Again, if you've taken an accounting class, you might know what this is already. It's the value of all your assets of a business, equipment, building, tools, etc. And the implicit cost of this capital is the opportunity cost of the capital that you would have realized if you used it in a different way. So if you're using equipment in your building to make cars, the implicit cost of capital would include maybe the money you would have made if you made ships instead of cars, that sort of thing. This chapter also, has either or decisions and how much decisions. How much decisions, you may remember, are the decisions at the margin, marginal decisions. Either or decisions are one or the other. Do I need to buy a car or not? Should I order nachos or a sandwich? How much decisions are, how many more? How much do you do? How many jalapenos on the nachos you bought? How many workers should you hire in the company? How long should you go to school? And we'll get into how we decide that with our marginal analysis. So first is marginal cost, and that's the cost of producing something. That's the additional cost by producing one more unit. If you think of, the book gives a good example of thinking at the margin. The margin is the edge. It's one more. So if you're going back to your example of going to school, your total cost every year, it looks like your first year is $30,000. So the marginal cost is one more year of going to school is just that 1 year of $30,000. 2 years of schooling costs you $70,000. So to go to one more year of school from 1 year to 2 years costs you $40,000. So as you can see, all the way up to 5 years here, that's $350,000 of total cost. That's a lot of money to go to school. This person, you would think, is going to be a doctor or something, but we're also looking at the implicit cost of going to school here, I think. So as you can see, marginal cost is going up for every year, and it's going up by a lot in this example. That doesn't always happen. So here we have an increasing marginal cost, and we are going to plot it out on the graph, and you'll see in a few slides why this is important. So the constant marginal cost occurs when and that's different than what we just saw, is when the additional unit is the same cost as producing the previous unit. That would have been a straight line horizontally rather than an increasing marginal cost. A decreasing marginal cost happens when usually when there's a learning effect in production. So in production of a complicated task, like in this example, assembling a car, workers at first are probably slow and mistake prone when they're making the first models, but as they gain experience and etc., there's a lower marginal cost when you produce more units. An example, more cars. Sometimes, and I think we'll see this too, and often there'll be a decreasing marginal cost in the beginning, and then it's constant, and then it increases after a while. And this happens because of, a lot of times because of economies of scale, and we'll see this a little later, so don't worry about that just yet. Marginal benefit is what you gain for producing one extra unit or service or whatever than the previous one. So you'll see here what would be Alex's benefit, and that would be his lifetime salary, I guess, of going to school. So if he goes to school for 1 year, that's $300,000. So his marginal benefit is that, because we started from zero. If he goes to school for 2 years, we're looking at $450,000. And as you could see, just like marginal cost, you just add on to the previous total. So 450 minus 300 is 150. So the marginal benefit is there at 150,000 for that second additional year of schooling, and so on and so forth. And you'll see in this example that marginal benefit decreases as you get an extra year of school. It doesn't make as much sense for him to stay in school that long because his benefit over his lifetime earnings goes, it doesn't add as much. It's still adding a benefit, but it's decreasing for every year. And we'll see very shortly how these two intersect. And here we go. So the marginal cost curve shows the cost of producing one more unit. So the benefit is the benefit derived from producing one more unit. So in decreasing marginal benefit, for example, I don't know why they switch examples. If you're mowing lawns, each lawn mowed produces less benefit than the previous lawn. Each unit produces less benefit than the one before. So I really wish they didn't switch from school to lawn mowing, but you see here, so quantity of lawns mowed, and his total benefit or his marginal benefit for every lawn mowed goes down. His marginal cost is rising for each one. At some point, the difference between the two is going to shrink to zero and then even get negative because as his costs increase, his benefits are decreasing. And we'll see we're going to want to be in this sweet spot here as close to zero as possible. And that might be a little confusing for some. So you can see here we're decreasing our marginal benefit and going back to the school, just so we can confuse us, I guess. Going back to the schooling example, for every year of school that Alex went, and it was Alex, right? Is his name? Anyway, his benefit is a little lower, just the marginal benefit. Remember, the total benefit was still higher and increased with each year of school, but the marginal benefit, the year for going, or the the benefit of going for an extra year went down. So the optimal quantity is the quantity that generates the most net gain. And usually that quantity is when marginal benefit equals marginal cost. In this example, there is no year where it's equal, but we're going to see where the additional profit is still positive but closest to zero. That's the amount we're going to get. And it looks like 3 years of schooling is going to be the sweet spot. You can see if he goes to, for 1 year of schooling, he has an additional profit, after you subtract the cost from the benefit, of $270,000 over his lifetime. If you were to go for another year of school, he still has a positive profit, $110,000. 3 years of schooling, still positive, $30,000. But if he goes to that 4th year of school, he will actually lose money over his lifetime. So as you can see, we want to get to a point if as close to zero being your additional profit, because you're always going to want to keep going, produce another unit or go to another year of school as long as there's some sort of positive profit. And the point at which that stops is zero. So that's when the marginal benefit equals marginal cost. And I hope this sticks with you because it's a pretty important point for the rest of the chapters. So you could see graphically what we just did with the marginal cost increasing and the marginal benefit decreasing. There's this optimal point. That sweet spot there is 3 years of schooling. So his total profit, when you add everything up, will be $410,000. And if he went for another year of school, if he went on here, you could see the costs are larger than the benefits, and he'd actually not lose money overall, but he would be worse off than from when he was going to school for 3 years. And this is the how many decision, marginal analysis. This is fairly important. Again, I want to drive this point home that you will be building on this for later chapters as well. This profit maximizing principle can be applied to just about how much or how many decision. You just kind of need to use some sort of common units, even if it's not dollars and cents. Sunk cost is another important thing, and that's something that's already incurred and is non-recoverable. This has no effect on future costs and benefits, so you should not take sunk costs into consideration. The book uses the example of putting money into a car to fix the muffler maybe, and then you find out that you need to put more money into it, or you could buy a new car. And if you don't, in this instance, you shouldn't take into account those first repairs. You should only take into account your choices that lay ahead of you, because you can't take back that muffler repair. An example I like to use is waiting in line in the grocery store. I hate that. You're waiting in line. You're in aisle 1, or in line 1, and the cashier, and then line 2 is full too. So you're waiting in line 1, and it looks like line 2 is moving ahead and ahead and ahead. And there's only one person at line 2, and there's still 2 or 3 in line 1. A lot of people will say, well, I already wasted so much time here at line 1, I'm going to stick it out just in case. Or, that's a sunk cost. There's no reason to stay in line 1. Move over to line 2. Get out of the grocery store. Get on with your life. So again, sunk costs are something that you can't recover. So you should ignore those when you're making decisions about future actions. There's no use crying over spilled milk. Behavioral economics is really interesting. I find it fascinating. People often make choices that fall short of the greatest possible economic outcome, sometimes because they're acting rationally, but sometimes they're acting irrationally. And yet it's sometimes entirely rational for people to make a choice that's different from one that generates the highest possible economic payout. For example, You can be concerned about fairness. Tip giving is a perfect example. In theory, for your best economic profit, you should give 0 tips. That just doesn't make economic sense. But it is fair to do that. That's a societal norm to tip 15% or say, to when you go, at least in America, when you go out to eat. Bounded rationality, and that's something that where you make a choice that's close to, but not exactly one that leads to the greatest possible payoff, because the effort of finding that payoff is too costly. There's no point in doing all that research for some decision. Sometimes it's just good enough to make an educated guess. And there's risk aversion. A lot of people don't want to sacrifice economic payoff. Or a lot, there's the willingness to sacrifice, some economic payoff in order to avoid potential loss. If someone's 401k is a great example of that. As you're younger, you have a little more risk aversion. You're not as willing to sacrifice economic payoff. A lot of younger people put their 401k investments into stock market rather than bonds because the stock market may pay off. As you get older, the common wisdom is to move that money slowly toward bonds that are a little less risky so you don't lose all your money right before you retire. I'm not at that point yet, but I'm getting there. So maybe I have to have a talk with my financial analyst at some point. Irrational. Of course, humans are irrational at times. But there's ways we can predict that. And there's a handy chart coming up that I think is pretty interesting. A lot of times people can misperceive the opportunity cost, such as maybe including a sunk cost or ignoring an implicit cost. Many people are overconfident, especially when they play the stock market. Having unrealistic expectations about future behavior. Maybe you ignore studying tonight because you think you're going to study twice as hard tomorrow. Everyone knows that's not going to happen. So maybe you're better off studying for a little bit tonight and a little bit tomorrow, especially with economics, right? Counting dollars unequally. A lot of people don't count and they spend more if they use a credit card because they don't count it the same way as cash. That's how a lot of people get in debt trouble. Being loss averse, that's refusing to sell something, maybe selling a stock that is performing like a dog, that's just losing money, but you picked it. And you don't want to be a loser, so you think it's going to rise. You're not willing to recognize that there's already a loss and just cut your losses and move on. And then having a bias toward the status quo. Status quo. I don't know what that is. And that's just something to, just do what everyone else is doing and not want to make a decision you don't want. You're just kind of, you don't want to do anything. So that's some of the mistakes in decision making. Again, I implore you, to really get a good grasp on marginal analysis, because this plays a big role in future chapters. Thanks for listening to me ramble, and I hope that got through to you.